Let's work through these questions. So if sine of theta equals 0.3 and cos of x equals 0.6, find the following. Now we're going to have to use our symmetry properties to solve these. So if I have sine of pi plus theta, what we're first going to do is figure out which quadrant I'm thinking of. So pi plus theta, well, pi is here, and if I'm plussing theta, that's going to take me into my third quadrant. And I know for sine is negative in my third quadrant. So therefore, I could say sine of pi plus theta is going to be equal to negative sine of theta. And negative sine of theta, well, if we know that sine of theta equals 0.3, negative sine of theta is going to be negative 0.3. So that's our answer to the first one. Let's now answer the next question, where we have cos of pi on 2 minus theta. Now, as soon as I see pi on 2, I know that I'm going to be dealing with my complementary properties, in which I'm going to be swapping my cos for a sine, or vice versa if I'm in the other case. But let's begin by figuring it out just as we did this one. I'm going to figure out which quadrant I'm in. So pi on 2, I know that pi on 2 is this one right here. This is pi on 2. And if I'm minusing theta, it's going to be going this way. So pi on 2 is that one. Let me put that really over the top of it so we know exactly where I'm talking about. Pi on 2 is there. And I'm going to be going that way. So I'm in my first quadrant. So I know that cos is, and I think I'm just going to put a plus sign, is positive, I'll put it in brackets, in first quadrant, Q1. Therefore, cos of pi over 2 minus theta, well, because cos is positive in my first quadrant, I can say that it's going to be positive sine on theta. Now, I know what sine on theta is. Sine on theta is 0.3. So therefore, I would say sine of theta is 0.3. So my answer is going to be 0.3. So that is my answer to the second one. That is my answer to the first one. Let's now answer our third question, sine of negative theta minus pi. Well, I'm first going to take out this negative. So I'm going to rewrite this as sine of negative, and then I'm also going to swap around these positions. So I'm going to get pi plus theta. Now I know because I'm dealing with sine, I can take this negative out to the front, and I'm going to be left with this. Now that I'm here, let's really treat this. Let me put brackets around it like that, and let me just treat what's inside. So I have sine pi plus theta. Now I'm going to do a bit of a cheat. We've already done this. We know that sine pi plus theta, well, here's pi. It's going to take me down here. So we know that it's going to be the same as negative sine on theta. That's what we did in our first question over there. And now I'm just going to get those two negatives cancelling out with each other. So it's going to be sine on theta, which is equal to 0.3. So my answer is going to be 0.3 for my third one. Let's now move on to question D, which says sine of 2 pi plus theta. So we know this is kind of a nice easy one. Sine of 2 pi plus theta. That is the same as sine on theta. And that's because we're just doing one full rotation of our unit circle. We're going one full loop around, one full loop, and then coming back to whatever our angle is. And we know that sine on theta equals 0.3. So my answer is going to be 0.3 for this one. Nice and easy. Let's now answer our third question here, E, which is cos of 3 pi over 2 minus theta. Now I know that 3 pi over 2, that means I'm dealing with my complementary symmetries, which means that my cos is going to change into a sine. But before we do that, let's just figure out which quadrant I'm in. 3 pi on 2, well, 3 pi on 2 is this one, 3 pi on 2, and I'm minusing an angle. So it's going to take me back here. So is cos positive or negative in this quadrant? Well, cos is negative in Q3. Therefore, cos of 3 pi over 2 minus theta is going to be equal to negative sine of theta. So let's just stop and reflect on what I just did then. I knew it was a negative because cos is negative in this quadrant, and I knew I had to change my cos to a sine because I'm dealing with 3 pi over 2. So now I just need to figure out what is negative of sine theta, and let me scroll up. I know that that is going to be sine of theta equals 0.3, so my answer is going to be negative 0.3, and that is your answer to that question. Let's now answer the next question, which is cos of 3 pi over 2 plus theta. So again, because I have this 3 pi over 2, I know that I'm going to be changing this cos to a sine, but let's first figure out which quadrant I'm looking in. 3 pi over 2 plus theta. Well, 3 pi over 2 is here. I'm plussing theta, which is taking me here. So in my fourth quadrant is cos positive or negative. Cos is positive in Q4. So therefore, I could say that cos of 3 pi over 2 plus theta is equal to positive sine of theta. And we know that sine of theta equals 0.3. So that is my answer to that one. Perfect. Let's keep on going. Next, we have this one, sine of pi over 2 plus x. So to answer this question, what we're first going to do is figure out which quadrant I'm in. So pi on 2 plus x. So that's going to be, here is pi on 2 up here. And if I'm going to be plussing an angle, I'm going to be coming to my second quadrant. Is sine positive or negative in my second quadrant? Sine is positive in my second quadrant. Next, I know that because I have this pi on 2, this sine is going to be swapping to a cos. So sine pi on 2 plus x, that is going to be the same as positive cos of x. So now we just need to figure out what cos of x is, and conveniently, we are told that information in the question. Cos of x equals 0.6. So your answer to this is going to be 0.6. Let's now answer the next question. So I'm going to begin by figuring out which quadrant I'm in. So pi on 2 plus, I'm going to be over here. Cos is cos positive or negative in my second quadrant? It is going to be negative. Is negative in Q2. Then I could say cos of pi over 2 plus theta. I know I'm going to change my cos to a sine. And then it's just going to be sine of theta. And then remember, this is going to be negative because we figured this out. So now I just need to figure out what negative sine of theta is. And I know that is going to be negative 0.3. And we know that because we're told what sine is up above. So that is my answer to this question. Let's now answer this question, but let's do it a little faster this time. So we know that we're dealing with sine of 3 pi over 2 plus x. Now, is sine positive or negative in this quadrant? So I'm in my fourth quadrant, and I know sine is negative there. So my answer is going to be negative cos of x. Now I know what negative cos of x is going to be because I know that cos of x is 0.6. So my answer is simply going to be negative 0.6. So that is my answer to that question. Let's now answer the next question, which is this. And again, let's do this really quick. So I know that I'm dealing with sine of 3 pi over 2 minus x. I know that 3 pi over 2 is here. If I'm minusing x, I'm going to be in this quadrant. So is sine positive or negative in that quadrant? It is going to be negative in that quadrant. And then I'm going to change my sign to a cos. So it's going to be that. So my answer, yet again, is going to be negative cos of x is equal to negative 0.6. So that is my answer to that question, negative 0.6. Let's now answer this question, cos of 2 pi minus x. So let me quickly think. I know that this is 2 pi, I'm minus an x, so that's going to bring me to my fourth quadrant. I know that cos is positive in my fourth quadrant, so that means that my answer is going to be simply cos of x, which is going to be 0.6. And just like that, we have got the answer of 0.6. Let's now finish this off by coming here. We know that that is the same as putting the sign over there. And I know that that is going to be equal to negative 0.3. So there are all your answers to these questions. Hopefully this has been helpful to you in getting all these answers. This is a really important skill that you should all master.